Can a comeback save a historical disaster in the most symbolic circuit for Ferrari? Today we analyze how Emilia Romagna's GP and what that could mean for the rest of the championship. Emilia Romagna 2025 was not a simple bad weekend for Ferrari. It was a public humiliation. A symbolic act of what happens when a team with history, budget, and ambition does not find the technical course necessary to live up to their expectations. Imola, sacred land for the Scuderia, became the stage of one of its darkest pages in recent years. And the problem was not bad luck or a punctual error. It was a succession of structural deficiencies that were naked before their audience. On Friday, from the first laps and training sessions, it was noted that something did not work. The SF25 was difficult to place in curve, unstable in braking, and nervous in changes of direction. Although the times in line were competitive, there was an obvious disconnection between what the car promised in the papers and what it really delivered on the track. The engineers knew it. The car suffered in the transition between fast and slow curves, showing a lack of aerodynamic balance that neither the previous simulations had anticipated so clearly. This already lit the alarms. But it was Saturday when the disaster was consolidated. In the qualifying session, neither Charles Leclerc nor Lewis Hamilton managed to enter the Q3. It was the first time since 1980 that Ferrari did not place any of his cars among the top 10 in Imola. And it was not because they failed in the pilot or making flagrant mistakes. Both squeezed the car limit. Leclerc, with the surgical precision that characterizes it, remained less than a tenth of the cut. Hamilton, still adapting to the nuances of the SF25 after his departure from Mercedes, simply could not extract more performance. The problem was clear: the car did not give more. The waste of time in slow curves was the critical factor. Telemetry exposed an alarming lack of load on the front axle, which prevented pilots from stopping late or attacking pianos aggressively. The lack of adhesion in the front train not only gave confidence to the pilots, but forced them to modify their paths in each attempt, losing valuable tenths in each technical sector of the layout. This curve deficit contrasted with a slight advantage in peak speed, a fact that speaks of an unbalanced design, fast in line but fragile in the most complex area of the circuit. The most painful thing was not to be surpassed by Red Bull or Mercedes, but to see how mid-table squires such as Williams and Aston Martin managed to get into Q3. The contrast was humiliating. The faces of mechanics and box engineers reflected more than frustration. They showed confusion. They did not know how it had been possible that, with so many resources invested, the car was not competitive on the stage that Ferrari should best know. Imola is not only an iconic circuit, it is the backyard of Maranello. If you can't perform there, where can you do it? And the most worrying of everything is that this was not an isolated event. From the preseason tests, the SF25 has been an unknown. A car with a decent career rhythm, but without classification explosiveness. And that pattern is repeated. What exploded in an obvious way was already hinted at previous races. Ferrari seems to be caught in a technical structure that does not finish finding the balance between aerodynamic and efficiency load, between stability and agility. Meanwhile, direct rivals evolve. McLaren continues to refine its MCL39, Mercedes improves in cold conditions, and even Red Bull, with all its internal problems, finds short-term solutions. Ferrari, on the other hand, faces the worst nightmare of a historical team: stagnation. And the most serious thing is that even in their most intimate territory they managed to light the spark. The fall at home was not only sports, it was emotional. And that leaves deeper scars than any track abandonment. On Sunday in Imola brought a contradictory sensation for Ferrari. On the one hand, the final results of the race showed a recovery. Lewis Hamilton finished 4th and Charles Leclerc 6th. But under that surface, what was exposed was an even more disturbing truth. Ferrari is not competing to win, but for minimizing damage. The word that was most repeated in the paddock halls was not progress, but containment. Because going up from the middle of the grill to stay out of the podium at home is not an achievement. It is a warning. From the start, both Ferrari pilots showed that the race rhythm of the SF25 was much higher than that shown in classification. Hamilton, with his usual tempo under pressure, made an impeccable exit. He won 2 positions in the first meters and remained firm during the first stint, taking care of the tires, measuring the distances and waiting for the strategic moment to attack. Leclerc, meanwhile, was more aggressive. He knew that he had to recover ground quickly before the group stretched out too much, and that forced him to take risks in the first laps. Fortunately, they went well. But in a circuit like Imola, where to advance is extremely difficult due to its narrow and technical nature, any attempt to come back requires a millimeter combination of rhythm, patience, and strategy. Ferrari in that sense played his cards well. They bet on a first long stint with middle tires, seeking to extend the stop window to take advantage of a possible safety car or a late undercut. When the opportunity appeared, they took advantage of it. Box's stops were fast, without errors, and the chosen moment was almost perfect for both cars. Even so, all that effort only allowed them to reach the 4th and 6th position. No quick lap. No real threat to the podium. Not even a direct battle with the first 3. And that, in terms of competitiveness, is a cold diagnosis. Ferrari was not in the fight for victory at any time. It was not a decisive factor in the development of the race. He was a secondary actor who did what he could from the shadows. Hamilton came to roll for a few laps in pace conditions very similar to the third classified, but was never within the DRS range. Leclerc, despite having the best race rate of the weekend according to the raw medium sector data, failed to break the Aston Martin cap or capitalize on the small gaps that were open to the front. This confirms a reality that has been brewing since the first race of the year. The SF25 works well in long batches, especially in circuits where the tire wear is high and constancy is rewarded. But it lacks the necessary spark to shine in specific moments. It does not have that magical classification. It does not have that explosive start that defines races. And above all, he does not intimidate his rivals. In this sport, when your opponents know that you can come from behind and pass them, they respect you. But when they know that you can only reach them when there is no time, they simply manage the distance. It must also be said that Hamilton made an almost perfect race. His driving style, less aggressive than that of Leclerc, seems to adapt better to the limitations of SF25. He knew how to read the times, save rubbers without losing pace, and precisely execute each section of the circuit. But even with all his experience and talent, he was out of the podium. Not because of his, but because the car simply does not give him the tools to compete in the same league that McLaren, Mercedes, or even Red Bull in his most unstable version. Emilia Romagna 2025 was not just one more career in the calendar. For Ferrari, it was much more than that. Imola represents a direct connection with its history, with its identity, with its people. It is the track that bears the name of Enzo and Dino Ferrari, located just a few kilometers from Maranello. It is his house, his emotional bastion. And yet, there, where they should feel invincible, the Scuderia was fragile, vulnerable, without answers. Imola ended up being a perfect metaphor of his season. Promise and expectation, followed by frustration and resignation. The weekend condensed all the symptoms of what does not finish working in Ferrari. A disastrous classification, a difficult car to balance, a decent career rhythm that only serves to make up the problems, and a generalized feeling that the team is not really competing for the objectives that had been proposed. All this was exposed with crudeness in its most symbolic circuit. What should be a party for tifosi became an examination of consciousness. There was no euphoria or pride. Only relief when the checkered flag waved and could say that at least they did not leave without points. Beyond the numbers, what was exposed in Imola was a lack of clarity in the project. Ferrari seems to continue without a defined identity. It is not known if the team seeks to develop an aggressive car that bets on classification, or a stable one that allows it to add regularly. Nor is a clear hierarchy perceived among their pilots. Hamilton and Leclerc offer different styles, different demands, and that further complicates the technical development direction. While other teams such as McLaren or Mercedes bet on coherent and consistent lines of work, Ferrari gives the impression of reacting a career after a career, without a firm plan that holds them. Frédéric Vasseur's leadership, which in 2024 managed to stabilize the team after years of erratic decisions, now begins to be questioned. The structure of the SF25, with its virtues at medium distance and its technical deficiencies in slow curves, shows a design that was not optimized to fight on all fronts. And that, in a season as competitive as the current one, is paid expensive. It is not enough to have a car that works well in the race. One is needed that imposes conditions, which marks territory since Saturday, that forces others to look for the mirrors. What happened in Imola is, deep down, a reminder that Ferrari is still a slave to his past. The pressure to pay at home, the need to respond to his hobby, the constant shadow of his golden years, all that becomes a burden. Instead of promoting them, breaks them. And until they are released from that backpack, it will be very difficult for a winner to build. Imola this time was not a refuge or springboard, was a mirror. And in that reflection, Ferrari saw everything he still lacks to be what one day was. The GP of Emilia Romagna 2025 left a clear and raw image of the moment that Ferrari is going through. The Scuderia stumbled again on the stage where he needed to affirm himself. And although he managed to minimize the disaster on Sunday, The general sensation is that the team continues to run from behind, without the control of its destination. The house race, which should have been a demonstration of strength, became a portrait of uncertainty and technical doubts that can no longer be ignored. Lewis Hamilton's performance offered some flashes of hope. Its adaptation to SF25 seems to advance, and its experience is being key to finding solutions in a complicated context. Charles Leclerc, on the other hand, continues to demonstrate his ability to extract the maximum of a car that is not up to his talent. But the individual potential of its pilots is not enough to compensate for the structural deficiencies of a project that still does not finish curdling. Ferrari needs to redefine his way. Find technical responses, yes, but also a more consistent and firm approach from the strategic. Because the competition does not expect, and as long as the rivals evolve consistency, Ferrari continues to depend on comebacks that, although brave, do not reach to build a championship.